As I read that reading, I always think, wow, what extraordinary people must be Christians. And yet, when we think about, especially All Souls Day, and there is a difference. I believe All Souls Day is technically Halloween and All Saints Day is the first. I've been thinking a lot about those of us on this side of the river and those who are now on another shore. When my father died, we said that my mother had done a great job of post-mortem deification or beification of my father. She spoke of him in very saintly terms that was not really the person we knew. As we say, bless her heart, and the older I get, the more I understand it. This Sunday, I am indebted to the late Reverend Dr. Thomas Langford, who was the Dean of Duke Divinity School when Larry first entered the Divinity School. Dr. Langford worked in various capacities for the university. After he gave up the deanship at the Divinity School, he continued on as a professor. He is who both Larry and I had for our basic theology, Christian theology course. And this All Saints, All Souls Sunday, I am indebted to him. Someone who must have been a classmate of Larry's when he was at Duke Divinity School posted a sermon preached by Dean Langford from the chapel in 1982 on November 1st, or actually October 31st. Dr. Langford, in his luscious, wonderful Southern accent, in his preaching said, "Let me offer a parable." It wasn't from the scriptures. He told the story of a mansion and a person giving a tour of the mansion. This docent shared how everyone was wowed by the chandelier in the foyer. And as the tour continued, the docent shared that it was a single light bulb in a back hallway that for years had guided the occupants of this house to their living quarters. And Dr. Langford said, so, in his very eloquent way, so is ordinary goodness, which constitutes unspectacular but consistent quality in life. So it was an ordinary light bulb in its goodness, which guided the family of this household consistently and faithfully to where they lived. That comment caused me to think in a lot of different directions this week. I thought about the ordinary things in life. Light bulbs, running water, electricity, a good cup of coffee. They're ordinary things, but their goodness creates consistent good life. As you know, Larry and I are waiting to move into our home off of Cornwallis Road. It is in the last section that was developed by Duke University back in the day when professors, staff members of a certain grade were offered as part of their packages some property upon which they could build a home. I don't know if you know that history or not, but anyway, you know, if you've been around me lately, that we're really, really excited and a little bit impatient, very ready to be back in our home that we have had since Larry served as the pastor at Resurrection United Methodist Church. What you probably do not know is that Dr. Tom Langford and his wife, Anne Marie, used to live in this same neighborhood. I listened to Dr. Langford's sermon, but then I had to go back and read it because I was struck with some information that I already knew, but then I learned about my neighborhood, about my relatively ordinary neighborhood. And so I'm going to read an excerpt from Dr. Langford's sermon. There are places of Duke history you ought to know. Now, you need to remember he's preaching to a Duke crowd, so if you're a Carolina fan, if you live in the Durham area, you should know this. Some years ago, a woman came to visit me. Her father had been the superintendent of the quarry from which the stone for these West Campus buildings were taken. Is there anybody here who has never been on the Duke University campus? Okay, I'm looking at Zoom. All right. If there is anybody, you ought to go at least for giggles and laughs to see this major educational institution. This work for Duke, she said, had been the most important activity of his life. He was prouder of having worked this stone than anything else he ever did. Was it possible, she asked, to have a plaque placed somewhere on campus to remember and honor his contribution? It is not usual for institutions to honor such persons. It usually requires major financial contributions or singularly recognized leadership to merit such a special place on campus. But this matter was taken up with the trustees of the university, with Professor George Williams being especially helpful throughout the process. I do not know who that is. I will be doing some homework. The trustees voted to set aside of the university, to set aside, the print's small, to set aside the arcade to the left as you enter the chapel as a place to commemorate people who make contributions to the university, which are ordinarily unrecognized. Several years ago, a plaque was placed on the wall. If you look sometime, you will read, "To the glory of God and in grateful memory of Edwin Eugene Dacus, 1873 to 1946, superintendent of the Hillsborough Quarry, under whose personal direction these stones were quarried, from which the original buildings of the West Campus of Duke University have been constituted." And Dr. Langford went on to tell the story of other ordinary people who did extraordinary things for the university. He went on to tell the following story. Several years ago, Duke opened some new home sites, actually where I will live. As usual, the streets were named for important people in the university's history. So a major street is named for Charles B. Wade, a former chairman of the Board of Trustees, and that was most appropriate. The first cul-de-sac off of Wade Street is Harvey Place. Do you know who this was named for? And I must say, I have walked my granddog around the Harvey Place cul-de-sac many a time, and I had to answer as I had my cup of coffee and listened to this sermon, "No, Dr. Langford, I do not know who Harvey Place was named for." Listen to this. It was Oliver Harvey, a black employee who organized the first labor union at Duke University. Oliver Harvey was an ordinary worker, a man of fine spirit and of great dedication to both the university and its employees. He is now dead, but I was most surprised and pleased to discover that he had been remembered and honored. It is rare to place plaques and name streets for ordinary folks. Usually they are remembered only by family and friends and spoken of in quiet conversation. Dr. Langford and Ms. Anne Marie lived on Harvey Place until Dr. Langford died. I had no idea who Mr. Harvey was and the good work he did, not just for the university, but for labor organizing in Durham. Ordinary people rarely get plaques or grand chapels or streets named for them. But on this day in the church calendar, we are reminded that it is the ordinary, in the ordinary, that God does the extraordinary. Dr. Langford now reigns with the saints in glory, and we ordinary people continue to work in the fields God has placed us in to build the beloved community. Ordinary people have opened the church building today. Ordinary people have played music today and operated virtual worship and greeted worshipers entering this building. Ordinary people will unload food tomorrow. Ordinary people gave out candy and offered kindness and love to children on Halloween. We will work hard tomorrow. We will be tired at the end of the day. And we ordinary people will have done an extraordinary thing. It's a busy week, friends. Your work is not done after you distribute food. Ordinary people will go to the polls on Tuesday and vote. And you will do an extraordinary thing. It's my hope that most of you have already voted so that you don't have anything get in your way on Tuesday. Not telling you how to vote, but I'm telling you to vote. Ordinary acts performed by beloved children of God. That is what makes for the extraordinary possibility that God's kingdom might come in our midst. On our own, we could not do this, but because of the extraordinary grace made known to us in Jesus Christ, we are able. We are equipped, and we are sent. This day, we remember the ordinary Christians who have joined the saints beyond this shore, and we continue to marvel at how God makes the ordinary extraordinary. Grape and grain, we shall share, and we continue this extraordinary call because God has equipped us, fed us, and sent us. That is the good news. Thanks be to God. Amen.